All right. Well, welcome back to part three of the BattleTech Advanced 3062 Rattler Challenge. Uh, we'll be making visual contact with the Rattler here pretty soon. We are at the end of round one, where the enemy's still taking its shots at us here. We've already lost, I believe, two of our yellow jacket units already. So the attrition is quite high, but we've laid down a significant blanket of smoke and fairly good coverage with the augmented fast cam rounds from the Hail units, the Hail artillery vehicles that we got, the Hail fast cam choppers that we put into place. Not bad considering that each one of those fast cam units just has the one clan LRM-15 there. So we've done fairly well with that. So our Phoenix Hawks have kind of moved over there towards the mountains. They're taking some shots. You can see that the Rattler has put down some pretty significant artillery fire. I believe the big circles that he's laying down are from the two Barracuda. I guess those are missile units, the Barracudas. Um, the radius on that is, I think it's about like 30 hexes. We're pretty close to it. So you're going to have a unit that can move, 14, 15 hexes just to get to the darn edge of the thing. Assuming you're dead center, if you're off a few more hexes, you get a little bit of movement there. So you can probably get by with something that moves at a 12, but you can see it's launching two of them. So there's some overlapping there. So you could end up going, it could be, 16, 17 hexes in one direction. So if you get caught on the edge of the map or, something like that, it's going to be tough. Yeah, you can see down there we've lost our two of our pilots already, Colby and Pack Rat. Those guys went down. But we have survived into round two. Hard to believe, we're basically, almost an hour into, being on the map, I think, at this point, or pretty close. And, we still haven't come into visual range of this Rattler just yet. And now, you can see, these yellow jackets, they've got about a hex or two to spare to get out of range here. So it looks like I'm taking advantage here. And it's like, all right, well, let's go up and get a look at this thing. And here it is. Just look at this freaking monster. What the hell is this? And, hats off to Bloody Doves and, the whole creation team. I think it's got its own helipad. Yeah, it's got these insane tracks. I think, look, there's a Mac under there, for Christ's sakes. So this thing spits out vehicles and it's just, oh my gosh. It's kind of beautiful. It actually is really, really well put together. So I don't even know what it takes to design something like this and to make it all work. And I mean, like, yeah, it's about to run over that shelter in there. But yeah, and that's where it spits out the vehicles. I think that's a new vehicle that was not on the map earlier. So we're getting a look at this thing here. And already, yeah, so we see twin improved heavy Gauss rifles, and we see two more heavy Gauss rifles. So I'm not sure if that's 4 Gauss rifles or just 2. Got AMS there. And you look at this, okay, 15,000 armor points and, structure to back that up. Interesting to note, that's a turret icon, but it's listed as a vehicle there. So, it's hard to say how this thing's going to react. It's going to act as a turret, or is it going to be like a tank? You know, to some degree that matters. Like when you had the Overlord or the Union dropships, you had something like 10,000 armor points per side, but you only had to get into one side. And just like a vehicle, once you hit that structure, expose that structure, the thing's done. So it's like an egg. You got to crack the egg. Once you crack the egg, you've won. I don't know if that's how this is going to work. And then, as we get a little bit more of a look at this thing, we're going to find out it's even more complex. If you're not intimidated by what you just saw, just wait. It gets infinitely worse and more complex when it comes to this vehicle here. And it really begs the question as to how the mechanics of really defeating this thing are going to come down. So you can already see the entire battlefield is saturated with red artillery circles. The good thing is it does not seem to care about hitting its own units. So, moving up and engaging this thing, although suicidal, may, at least direct some of that artillery on some of these support units. So you might start to craft in your head an idea where you're like, well, if I'm going to get hit, they're going to get hit. Or if I can be in that area and then move out with my mobility, maybe you can just trick this thing into blowing itself up. Maybe that's the secret sauce, right? Maybe that's the trick that you were supposed to figure out all along is like, well, you don't have to bring enough firepower to this thing. You just got to trick this thing into destroying itself, right? Which, there's a total like 1980s cartoon villain kind of logic to that, right? So there may very well be a strategy which incorporates that. And then if that's the strategy, maybe you don't have to focus on really any of these units or even hitting the Rattler, but you come up with, the highest mobility thing that you can and the highest survivability unit that you can, and just try and fly through this and make it kill itself, right? So we've got our Rack 5 yellow jacket that's coming up here on the side of the mountain. Now we've got some good strikes, right? And it's at this point you look at all those targeting points and you go, wait a second, hold on. There are individual segments to this thing, right? So like we're seeing the Rattler chassis left here. There's a left chassis. There's a right chassis that we're seeing. You can see all the bonuses of these things. This thing has LRMs, SRMs, ER large lasers, machine guns. Oh, here's the left rear track. Well, that means there's 4 tracks. Long thumb artillery. There's the Aero 4s, twin ER larges, right? More SRMs, more AMS. So that first look we got, tip of the iceberg, right? Here we see, yeah, there's that central. I think that's like the central body. With the heavy Gauss's. You can see that the bonuses on this thing are just insane. We have the Rattler Tower. Oh, there's the Barracuda, the sub-capital laser. That's the biggest thing you've got to get rid of. So, just in your initial threat assessment, you go, okay, if I can get rid of those Barracudas and that sub-capital laser, maybe you have a chance, right? Because you can dodge Aero 4 all day long, no problem. Rattler chassis rear, more AMS, twin ER lasers. And of course, all the bonuses to boot. So, this thing is beyond, it's just, it's like its own battalion of mechs, right? Oh, right, rear track, there's another Barracuda, right? So we already knew there's 2 Barracudas coming at us. You see the different bonuses it's got. It's got the energy and the missile, and I think we've already counted like maybe close to 8 AMSs. Good luck hitting this thing with missiles because that's not happening. Oh yeah, throwing a long tom artillery just for spite. Yeah, so this is multiple segments, multiple turrets. So is it turrets attached to a vehicle, which may very well be the case. If you take out a turret, does that turret fall off? Do you just go for the main body then, the central body? Is that what you have to do to get the kill shot? I think so. I mean, that's where I would focus my damage if I'm really just trying to take this thing out. Is that central core? And if that goes, then in a similar fashion to the drop ships, once you crack that egg, it doesn't matter what was on it or attached to it, right? So but that's 15,000 points there, and then each one of these turrets has 12. Looks like 12,500. But you've got to get rid of that Barracuda or both of those Barracudas. Wait, so that's 2 different sections, and that naval laser. So it looks like you got to focus on the tower portion first, and then that right rear section. However, I know there's a cruise. Spoiler alert, but there's a cruise missile 50 that comes from somewhere. So there might be another section there that we didn't get a look at. And the cruise missile 50 is probably maybe that's the most devastating. I don't know if that's the naval laser. I don't know if it's just, I don't know. But this thing has, the cruise missile 50 is basically a mini nuke. So it does an insane amount of damage. And basically anything caught inside the radius at that point is going to die or come very close to it. The damage from these Barracudas and that cruise missile 50 also throw on something like 100 heat. So even if you survive it, there's a good chance that you are shut down. So what are you going to do? So we've worked our Hail artillery vehicles over, and we're looking to see if maybe we can get in range to put on this tag barrage, but it looks like maybe we're not close enough just yet. So we're probably going to lay down and continue to lay down more fast cam rounds. Right, we've got this unit here that's kind of getting outside of the bubble. So we want to kind of protect our access to this mountain range. Right, we've laid down the smoke, we've laid down a good amount of the fast cam, and we're trying to kind of take ownership of the high ground. Which is that's a 3,000-year-old military strategy, maybe older. But that's documented with Sun Tzu, The Art of War, I believe. So, but he had to have learned it from somebody, right? So, but we see these different units that are in there. There's that Archangel. He already had some leg damage. I think he took like 20 mines. We caught him doing that. So he's still comfortable moving around. So let's give him some more of this fast cam here and continue to expand that field. The mechanic on mines and artillery, it's a little I don't know, it's a little interesting, and because you would think that artillery would clear that all out, and I think to some extent, at least I saw with the tag barrage in a previous battle with like Snords or regulars, where it's kind of exploring how that tag barrage worked. So if you lay down fast cam, and each time fast cam hits a hex, each one of those little red triangles, it kind of counts how many fast cam rounds are in that hex, and it looks like you can kind of keep adding them. I don't know if there's a high end limit as to how much you can put in one hex, but you might just get one fast cam round, or I think I've seen this definitely up in the 20s. So 20 times 3, 4, 5 points of damage. All of a sudden that starts getting real serious, and moving through it's really bad. But that hex knows exactly how many rounds are in that hex. Now, if you come and hit that hex with artillery, it seems to kind of negate the damage of the mines, but the hex still believes that the mines are there. Or if not the hex, the mech that's in or around them still thinks that there's fast cam there and won't move through it. So even if the mines are destroyed and and it's not doing any damage, the field that you've laid down will remain effective in tricking the AI into not wanting to move through it. So, which is actually, like, at first you think, well, okay, maybe that's a little bug or something, but really if you think about it, it mirrors real life really well, right? You see a minefield, you see some mines go off in the minefield, and your first thought is not to go, oh, that section's clear now. Let's just go ahead and move our whole operation through that, right? That's No, it's the danger is in what you cannot see, right? So that kind of makes total sense. So, and even if it looks like maybe some of these triangles go away after you've hit it with artillery, we'll see that in a little bit once we get these hail artillery vehicles doing their thing. It's still a real effective strategy. So fast cam is by far the most effective thing that we've accomplished, I think, in this playthrough. So we're starting to get through this here in just a little bit and realize our strategy. I think we've done a good job of getting out of the way of most of this artillery, but that becomes a challenge because it keeps coming at you every single round here. We're moving in with our Phoenix Hawks here, so they're having no problem whatsoever escaping the radius there, the blast radius. And I think we're just discovering how high this mountain up here goes. So that gives you huge advantages when you're firing down on these support units. Plus, it's putting some distance between you and them now, especially now that they're locked into place with that fast cam. So that kind of keeps that fast cam keeps these guys from boxing you into places you don't want to be. And then the other advantage too is with all the chaos and so many different units to strike at, it kind of seems like if you send one group to the left and one group to the right, as these units are locked in place with the fast cam, they're going to have to kind of pick their poison when they're shooting at you, and they're going to have to put their back to somebody. So it almost seems like if you've got some units that can put some ranged fire, as soon as they turn, you'll be able to get some pretty good back shots. And you have to be really efficient, I think, with getting those types of shots. You always want to prioritize back shot, but with so many units on the board, you can't. It's going to be a hard slog if you're just a straight up fight, trying to take out all the front armor. You could try and minimize that with some precise shots and targeting specific locations. I know everybody loves the glorious headshot, but that's not easy necessarily to get. It's not guaranteed in this game. They're nice when you get it, but if I like to target the left torso typically, or a torso that has ammo in it, because if you knock that off, a lot of times you get the engine crits if there's XLs in there, and you get the ammo explosion, and you blow off the arm weaponry, which is the torso weaponry. So it's kind of the best strategy, most efficient way to use that precise shot, I think. Plus the percentages are way higher, usually 60-70%. So that kind of thing can work, but even then, there's so many units. If you can get these back shots and knock a unit out in 1 or 2 strikes, that's going to be what you want to do there. So we see with our yellow jackets, we've got the 8 evasion going on there, and now after I've seen the Rattler, it's got that +4 to strike on it. It's got ignore 2 evasion. All right, well, my quick math is that's like negating 6 of your evasion right there. So if you're at 8, you're only at 2 evasion. This thing's going to be able to hit you really easily, actually, especially with its ranged weaponry. Those Gauss rifles, they might as well be dedicated anti-aircraft weaponry, which is a funny way to do anti-aircraft, but it's pretty darn effective. Throw in the ballistic advantage of +1, throw in the C3 advantage, another +1, and now you're basically at a regular ranged percentage to hit. That's where that smoke of +2, difficulty to hit, now that gets you back up to 3 or 4 difficulty to hit again. So that definitely makes your odds in your favor, but it's not enough. As we've seen in 1 round, we already lost 2 units. You can already begin to estimate how many rounds this thing's going to last, right? Wouldn't imagine losing 2 units per round that you're going to be here much past round 8. So and that's even with the high evasion and the high mobility. So whatever strategy you come up with, it's going to require everything coming together really, really well. But you've got to figure out how to get some of these the big guns off the field. And the more I think about this, it's that that top tower unit there that's got to go. And that's the rub, man. Everything needs to go. Everything will kill you. So what's the most dangerous part of it? It's like, okay, you can take some Gauss rounds with bigger units. Your lighter units can't. Yeah, it's definitely a tough nut to crack, and I can see why nobody's done it yet. But it feels like it's on the edge of doability, and it's hard to know that, or it's hard to believe, I should say, that the creators would put together something that's totally unbeatable. There's it's either take this thing straight up and approach it straight up and beat it straight up, right? Or there's always cheese to be found in any gaming system or strategy, right? So is there some really ultra cheesy way of knocking this thing out? There's lots of different ways to attack units, right? Does this thing have to manage its heat? Will it shut down if you overheat it? It's hard to tell, because I still don't know what this thing is, right? Is it a vehicle, or is it like an amalgamation of turrets, right? That matters a little bit. because those things behave differently. Um, but either way, a heat strategy might work really, really well. Because heat damage is multiplicative on both those types of units, turrets and vehicles. And it's like a factor of 3, I think. Even if it's double, it's still pretty good. So maybe a strategy where you come in with insane amount of inferno damage, um, or there might be trying to think if there's some other. Well, you've got plasma cannons, but then you're ammo dependent on the plasma. So I'm trying to think if there's a PPC that adds heat damage or something like that. I feel like there might be, and so getting a bunch of that onto the field somehow might be the strategy. Um, yeah, there's just more than one way to skin a cat, right? We're exploring an artillery strategy here. And of course, if you could just sit back and plug this thing with artillery, that'd be great. But obviously, it's going to be able to strike back at you. Oh, that little thing he said right there too. I thought that was interesting. So he does kind of taunt you, and once again, by 80s video game logic, is there a hint there in the taunts? And he said, You're not very nimble, are you? Well, nimble is one of the mech traits that you have, right? So it's almost like saying, oh, you have to have that nimble trait to somehow survive this, which definitely makes sense. I think my previous strategy, I was coming in with the Grizzlies, and I believe they have the nimble trait. It's definitely one that gives them some additional evasive, and you can get up to +10 evasive on the Grizzlies. But still, even then, I was not able to get those units out of the way of these large artillery strikes, that are coming in. And on the first artillery strike, half their torsos were just gone. Out of the 7 units I had, 3 of them were destroyed right away, and then the rest were just crippled or overheated. So it was just it's okay, even with all that mobility and everything's going on, I wasn't able to survive very long. And then you'll see that pop up a little bit a couple of times, and then more often than not, because it goes really fast. But I figured out that most of the time when he's popping up there and taunting you, he's sending out a vehicle to come get you. Yeah, look at this artillery just coming in. And then you've got the lingering fires and everything. So this battlefield just becomes a total disaster. Not a very permissive environment at all. There we go. We've lost another of the yellow jackets, and yeah, the attrition is just pretty insane. And it's a huge step up too from the regular OPFOR that you're usually used to, right? If I was deploying a force like this on any other map, my losses would be very, very minimal. There we go. There's another one down, right? So now we're definitely losing 2 yellow jackets per round. And these are high mobility units. There's distance here. And these are just the precision strikes from its regular weapons. This isn't even the artillery that's causing these attacks here. So these units, they were able to come in and put that smoke in, thank goodness, but that's about all they were able to accomplish. And I wonder, we've got most of our units off to the side here. Well, at least everything that's surviving is off to the side and over up the mountain. I believe at this point, everything that we sent towards the middle, that was gone almost immediately. So then it's are there strategies where you can, put something on, put some damage at extreme range, you start to think about stuff like ELRMs. Well, okay, that gives you really extreme range, thank goodness. But guess what? We saw 6 to 8 AMSs on that thing. It's not getting through. And you're definitely not going to be able to bring enough ammo. So that's not happening. Your extreme, PPCs, ER PPCs and things like that, you're going to have to get still pretty close. That's going to be able to shoot you back with those improved Gauss rifles. Yeah, look at our sad losses there already. We already lost a good portion of that yellow jacket team. And I keep leaning towards the PPC because every time you hit that PPC, you get that sensor debuff, because of the +1 difficulty to hit. You're not going to be able to use your sensors on this, because it's C3I, so it's immune to, sensor interference. But the additional debuff there with the PPCs each time you hit it, gives it a +1. In fact, you can see it on this yellow jacket there. I'm going to hit it with 1 there. So, and it's cumulative too. I don't know if there's a cap on how high it goes. I think I've seen it as high as 9. So, you hit something with 9 PPCs, it's not going to hit you. But how do you bring enough PPCs to bear, right, and still have mobility? These every solution has a counter to it, right? And and the thing with this map is you've got everything's a dilemma versus a problem, right? Problems you can solve, right? And there's a solution. Whereas a dilemma is a damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation, right? There's going to be a negative outcome no matter what you choose. So which negative outcome will you pick? And then it's a menu of trying to decide, which negative outcomes in each round can you can you survive through? Not just live with, I mean, but survive to see another round. And then have you spent so much time avoiding the worst negative outcome that you can't damage your opponent? Well, guess what? Then it's just a matter of time. So this is definitely a really tough nut to crack. You can see it just gets increasingly more difficult to just get out of those artillery, artillery strikes out of the range. And now it's pushing us so far out, we don't even have visual range on the target anymore. But now we are looking at, dropping in some more fast cam, with the hail rounds here. And actually, we're gonna try our tag barrage here for the first time, and see if we can't start to lay down some artillery fire. So we're just like, well, are we in range? We're not even in range for artillery strikes, even attacking the ground and that sort of thing. So, we're gonna have to try and get off and, get in range some other way. Yeah, we're just too far away. So, artillery rounds, that's another type of, way to manipulate the battlefield, right? It's gonna move your opponent where you want them to go. And just like the AI, you don't want to be in that. Although it's like, yeah, you can take some arrow 4, rounds. That's possible. You can definitely do that, and have some survivability. But with these, Barracuda strikes and definitely the cruise missile strikes that enable PPC strike, it's just completely devastating, and you're not going to have any sort of opportunity at survivability. Yeah, as we find our way being pushed to the edge of the map here, it's increasingly difficult to find an angle or find a target, or be able to put any sort of damage on this thing. And if you're just running the whole time, well, that's survival itself is not the goal here. The goal is to blow this damn thing up. We're being chased around by these yellow jackets that it spit out, and that seemed like a much bigger issue. When I had the grizzlies down on the ground hopping around. Funny enough, it's like, I've created all these Phoenix Hawks here to have the anti-aircraft ability to take out these Phoenix Hawks, but it's like the Phoenix Hawks aren't what's killing me, right? The Phoenix Hawks don't have, they might get a shot in every once in a blue moon, but they don't have that +4 advantage that the Rattler has. So, I'm kind of thinking here, especially with this model here with the light PPC, see, okay, I get the hit on it with the precise strike, but we've already hit it, I think, before, but that's not enough to take it down in one strike. So we're dogfighting with this thing that, doesn't have a great chance of hitting us. Meanwhile, we're not putting damage on the Rattler where we need to. And, it definitely seems like the strategy, of putting the anti-aircraft on, it's like, okay, it's going to allow me to dogfight with these guys and eventually take them down. I think we get this guy here, or at least start working him down. And, but it's like, is that really the most effective use of our resources or our time? So as we're seeing this unfold, it's like, yeah, we can definitely do a little bit of this. Do we need to dedicate 5, 6, 7, 8 units of, to doing it, And I think, the idea behind this was, okay, as we get to the extreme edges of the map, the one advantage of getting pushed so far out is that as some of these Op 4 units come towards you, you're able to isolate them, right? And we can see that happening right here is we're able to, move our guys into, out of position of the killing field, and we're able to, put a bunch of shots on this one specific unit, right? So he's, isolated, ISO'd. And that's okay. That gives us in this one engagement here. It's like, okay, we're 5-on-1 or 6-on-1, and we can take him down. And then, theoretically, you do that enough times, you get enough of these guys come out, you can whittle down that support Op 4. And then maybe you survive long enough to begin to move in and get some, some strikes on your primary target. The other thing that does seem to work here is, we're putting this, PPC debuff, at least really effectively on this yellow jacket. If we've hit him 4 times, he's got a, -4 to hit. He, throwing our 11 invasion, he's definitely not hitting us. That at least does equal, something that resembles a near impossible shot. So that strategy does seem to have a little bit of efficacy. It's proved. But is it the most powerful thing that we can find? You can see that, we're hitting it with light PPC, which only does 25 points of damage. It's my recollection. Throwing the fact that he's got, a little bit of damage resistance there, so that's going to knock it down a bit. Yeah, light PPCs, it's like trying to take down a bear with a pea shooter. You could theoretically do it if you survive long enough and can run fast enough and far enough, And then you got to kind of hope too here that's like, well, okay, if we're struggling to get outside of these zones of attack, these artillery strike zones, that they're going to struggle with that too, and that they're going to take some damage and get knocked out of the fight, right? This overlapping Arrow 4 and the Barracuda and the cruise missiles and naval PPCs and everything. So, going back to that idea, if you can just stay mobile long enough, that maybe this thing just tears apart its own Op 4. And that'd be an interesting strategy to try. Is just put together the fastest group of lambs that you can, There's a few in the game. I mean, I think there's even an Irby Lamb in this game. I haven't fielded it yet, but I can't imagine that being a very effective unit. But it's funny as all hell. Um, you almost got to hope that someday somebody figures out how to take this thing down, and then the challenge becomes, what's not how you take it down? It's like, can you take it down with style? So can you take it down with Irby Lambs? But you put down your fastest Lamb units and you just circle it. Just circle the edge of the map. Don't worry about firing anything. Maybe you don't even need a weapon, right? You just need to move. Um, so whatever unit can do that and constantly evade this artillery fire, let it tear itself up. Let it destroy all the OPFOR. How many circles around the map will you need to make? 40, 50? I mean, I can only imagine. And then can you get it to drop artillery on itself? Can you get it to nuke itself with that Cruise 50? I don't know. I have no idea. But for that to happen, you're going to have to fly right into it, right?